Okay, thank you very much.
I believe we're dealing with camera original material. I don't believe we're dealing with duplicates. The reason I believe that is because it appears to be Kodak Super XX film, which was intended to be reversal processed. And it appears in this case it was reversal processed. There's always an image degradation that intrudes when you duplicate a piece of film. And I don't see that. I don't see that characteristic degradation. A reversal film, or actually reversal processing, is a process by which the film is developed directly into a positive image without being developed into a negative and then duplicated onto another piece of film to produce a positive. You get a positive image on the original film. The film samples that I've seen so far are on the type of material that was used in 1947.
So if it's not a human being, and if it's a genuine autopsy, and if it can't be fabricated, would it be right to say it's better than 50-50? I don't know what it is. It's at least 50-50.
That is what?
Something unknown, medically unknown. Possibly alien, who can tell?
I don't know what it is. 100%, I don't know what it is.
No matter how well the film is actually researched in terms of its chemical composite, you will never know what the content of that film is. I don't think that there is anything that can be done to achieve that level of satisfaction. You know, sure enough, you can come up with a fixed date. This film is 1947. Sure enough, you can say that the film was shot in 1947. There are tests to confirm that as well. But how will you ever know what the content of that film is?
Whilst in Roswell, we were fortunate to meet Lieutenant Robert Shirky. In 1947, he was stationed at Roswell and was attached to the 509th Bomb Group. We asked him if he'd seen the autopsy footage.
I saw it 3 different times. Once before it was shown on television, then the 2 times it was on television. And my personal feeling is it's a fake. The camera work was lousy, and the individuals playing the parts of doctors acted a little strange. And one of the things I picked up on was that the suits they were wearing, if they were supposed to be completely encased in a suit to protect them from any disease or whatever they thought of, they had no air supply feeding the suit.
Is it possible the suits were prototypes using a carbon filter and an air feed from a hose attached to a boot, perhaps?
Oh, anything's possible, but the film didn't impress me as being a proper type film.
It was clear to us that Lieutenant Shirky had not seen uncut and unedited footage of the autopsy. He was most interested to see the original film.
The film I just saw concerning the dissection is more complete, and it was a better film than what they showed on television. And it's caused me to rethink my conclusions. Once you see the entire film and have the explanations going along with it, I can understand that there's a possibility that it's true, that it was real, made at that time.
There may be some parts that are shortened, there may be some parts that are slightly out of context, but our actual mission on this project was to show the film in all its glory. And I do not believe there is anybody out there who could say that our editing was done in such a way as to confuse whether it was an autopsy conducted by pathologists or surgeons or not.
Cyril Wecht is a former president of the American Academy of Forensic Scientists. He has performed or supervised close to 40,000 autopsies.
I have never performed an autopsy on any body that even closely resembles the being that we see on this film.
The strange
that
creature,
characteristic
who some are
degradation.
saying comes from outer space, does fit
reversal.
the popular conception of what an alien
Or
looks
actually
like.
reversal.
The huge head, the enlarged eyes are familiar from books and movies on the subject. However, it has other bizarre features not common to humans.
There are 6 fingers on each hand, and there are also 6 toes on each foot, a condition known as polydactyly. And that's seen in various kinds of chromosomal or genetic abnormalities and defects.
Wecht's original reaction was that we are looking at a woman with Turner's syndrome, a chromosomal disorder which affects 1 in 5,000 female births. The victims lack feminine chromosomes and do not develop sexually. However, few survive into adulthood.
99% of people who have these sexual chromosomal abnormalities abort spontaneously. In other words, they're just not born. Could this represent some very unfortunate woman who had a malignancy, probably of the ovaries or the cervix, the uterus, who then received radiation treatment? That's a possibility that we should keep in mind. But that would not explain, as far as I'm concerned, obviously the polydactyly. That's not going to make toes and fingers grow. That would not explain the disproportionately large head, and would not explain the disproportionately large orbital sockets. This supposedly was filmed in 1947, and while things haven't changed, we see some things that would have been expected at that time, such as the use of a handsaw in removing the skull cap. I should also like to point out that this kind of a rectangular-shaped, somewhat sunken tray was the kind that I recall being around many, many years ago. We don't see these things around very much today, if at all. I cannot relate these structures to abdominal contents. The liver, if it were the liver, should be over here to the right. I'm seeing a mass that I cannot readily explain, and I have great difficulty in correlating this with any human body that I have seen. This is a structure that must be the brain if it is a human being. It looks like no brain that I've ever seen, whether it's a brain filled with tumor, a brain that has been radiated, a brain that has been traumatized and is hemorrhagic. I would have to say, as difficult as it is for me to say it, as reluctant as I am to say it, that what I have seen here does not appear to be a human being. What is this? I would prefer to say, for the time being, that it is humanoid. I'm not going to say it is from a distant planet. What planet? I don't know. But I cannot say that it is a member of the human race as you and I know the human race.
The reason that the incident was quieted down, the main reason was panic. That we're all of a sudden we're confronted with something from another place or another time or another dimension, or we had no idea what we're dealing with. And relating that all the way back to 1938 with H.G. Wells and the invasion of the Martians and all people committing suicide and doing crazy things, they're afraid it'd just bring total chaos. Also, they had to take into consideration what we're dealing with here, a new technology or what.
What the debris looked like was stainless steel that had become in contact with very extensive heat. It would be like very bright, and then it would be a pink, and then to a dark brown, and almost to black.
You couldn't burn it. You couldn't tear it. Take the aluminum foil, the material that looked like aluminum foil, wad it up in your hands, then it would come out without a crease on it.
One of the things that I have a lot of fun with is the story about the metal that they wadded up and they crunch up in their hand and it comes back.
You could crush it in your hand and it would, wrinkles would all come out. It'd just straighten back out.
One of the people that interviewed me once before says, well, we don't have anything like that today. So I kind of chuckled and I waited till we got off the air and I said, you remember what you said about the technology? We don't have anything like that today. I said, but it's right before your eyes. He says, "What do you mean?" I says, "Well, for instance, like this." I said, "I got these about 3 years ago. They're really interesting. You know, we don't have anything like that today, do we? This is called memory metal. It goes back to its original shape. I got it because I got these frames because I was always sitting on my glasses and always ended up having to buy new frames. Well, I've had these now for 3 years, and obviously they're in good shape."
My belief is the reason they kept all this secret was they wanted to try to copy the materials. Is, you know, not have to share it.
I find it extraordinary that footage purportedly shot in 1947 shows a device so much similar to this. We consider this absolutely state-of-the-art. Well, the similarity between our data hand devices and that which have just recently been developed and that control panel that was purportedly filmed in 1947 is absolutely astounding. Our view is a device just like was shown, was quite sophisticated enough to control anything, including a spacecraft. If aliens developed that control panel, they've done a wonderful job. They would have done what we are in the process of trying to do. Now, if someone did that in 1947, I'm extraordinarily impressed. And if they did it with a technology advanced enough to build flying saucers or spaceships, I'm extremely flattered.
The more that we learned about the technology and the advances that we made, it made it a greater case for keeping it secret.
Can you take us through these symbols and explain them?
Yes. Well, trying to take into account the slight differences here. This seems to be a broken letter, which is consistent with an E.
Yes.
And then this looks a reasonably clear...
The inverted V, yes.
Lambda, the L.
Right.
Which perhaps is the clearest Greekness here.
Yes. And in an English pronunciation, how would you say that? L.
Yes, L.
And in, yes.
Yeah. Then we've talked about this, what
Double E.
may be an X or an E twice. This, I mentioned, looks like a phi, an F. That's a bit of a mess in the photo. In ancient Greek, if this were Eleutheria, it would be a U, which would be written as a V.
Yes.
Then this would be quite consistent with the TH sound at certain periods in the
That's the
Greek
circle
world.
with the horizontal line through the middle.
In the after the period of Alexander the Great down into the Roman Empire, that's an alternative, fine. Then we have another of
E.
X.
And
then
the P shape.
The R, yes, the
That's
row.
right,
Row. Then a rather complex thing. If that's going to be read as a simple I, I cannot explain the additional bits. One does get a letter like that sporadically throughout the Mediterranean
Someone's
world.
handwriting, perhaps.
Can mean a various number of things. Sort of thing you keep in the back locker if you need an extra letter, as it were, when you're inventing alphabets. But if it's an I, it's an odd one. And then not impossible that that's an A. From the photo, I cannot quite see the bottom line. It looks like a delta, simply, but a badly written A would not cause too much trouble. I could see that somebody has written Eleutheria there. I could, yeah.
And that means?
Freedom. It's whether there's any more at the beginning. It doesn't look as though, it looks as though it's all there, doesn't it? It begins and ends.
Yes.
So that's something.
So that is
something, yes.
Something you wouldn't necessarily disagree with.
No, if it were a broken piece, you would have to say, I don't know what was here. It might have said no freedom.
Do you think that might be the name of a vehicle, perhaps?
Greek boats had names like that in the ancient world. You'd name your boat with a concept sometimes.
Oh, really? If you were to find a strange piece of metal in your garden, and it had this
these symbols and legends on, what would you make of it?
I would try and guess where it might come from, which in this case is the trouble that we don't know, because everything has a context, and sometimes it's meaningful only in that context. Say if this were the name of a craft, a Lutheria, that would give meaning to the inscription.
If this, as it appears, is involved with highly advanced technology, would you be able to relate that as being an ancient text or script somehow in juxtaposition with something of advanced technology, and from that point of view, meaningful? For example, when Thor Heyerdahl set sail, he called his vessel Ra, didn't he? Calling back to a previous age.
Point, yes,
Is this...
well, from the purely Greek point of view, and let's say that this looks to be Greek-based, the technology, of course, is totally alien to the ancient world as far as any evidence exists. And the addition of the inscription would therefore suggest that it has nothing to do with that particular world. And as I suggested, because of the letter forms not earlier than that, it could be something totally separate, of course.
Those symbols on the object that I saw on the film do not resemble any language that I studied myself. I mean, they vaguely resemble maybe capital Greek letters, but then again, capital Greek letters are different. They're not Egyptian, they're neither Old Egyptian, Middle Egyptian, Late Egyptian, Demotic, Coptic. They're not Arabic, they're not Persian. They're not Latin, obviously, they're not Greek. The perfect workmanship of the signs themselves are the perfectly round circles, the perfectly straight lines. They don't waver and they don't vary in width and in depth as far as I can tell on the tape. I would assume that the society who produced that piece is either comparable to our own society in its technological achievement or possibly more advanced.
The interesting thing that I find about the Santilli film as to the surgeons that are in there, I believe that the individual that cut into the cranium of the entity that was on the table in the film, I firmly believe that to be Dr. Brunk. I believe that he took notes there because he had specific questions that no one else would get to see the entire creature itself. The various organs would be sent to experts within their field. For example, a heart specialist would get what we perceive to be the heart. A liver specialist, that which we perceive to be the liver. Kidney specialist, that which we might perceive to be kidneys. But never the whole creature. He had specific questions about the internal structures, the internal anatomy of this creature that he needed to resolve. So he made notes that was later transcribed by someone on the outside by the mirror, because they wasn't going to take that paperwork that he was making the notes on. But he did not want to put it in the official tape recording that was being made. I believe furthermore that the person that you see a gentleman back there with just a face mask on. I believe that history will prove that to be Dr. Vanderbar Bush. And I believe that Dr. Vanderbar Bush is in fact the individual that headed up the entire UFO investigations program for the United States government at that time.
There's been criticism leveled at the way the personnel conducted themselves, and it would appear that they were not professionals, and if they were members of the military, that might go some way to explain why their conduct was not that of either a coroner or a photographer in those circumstances.
Yes, I agree with you. I mean, it really depends on the personnel that were there at the time, the restrictions that were surrounding the event in terms of security. And it could be that the people conducting the dissection, autopsy, whatever, were surgeons and not pathologists. It could be that the nurses were not nurses, but military personnel that were there at the time.
And I think that's why these people were in fact involved, right at ground level. To be sure, they were the ones that dictated policy at that time. which would ultimately lead to where we are today as far as the official ridicule and the still classified aspects of our knowledge of what we really know about UFOs.
Certain rumors circulate the film industry about certain special effects experts who have actually claimed to have made this film.
First I've heard of that. I mean, I can tell you that every special effects company in town have contacted us to say that they can replicate it. I've not yet heard of any special effects companies that say they have shot it. However, you know, if they have, please come forward and put us all out of our misery. And please, you know, show some evidence to prove it. But I can tell you now, that's not going to happen.
So somebody else is looking for a little bit of fame, perhaps, on the back of this film.
Absolutely. I mean, photographs have circulated and various disinformation has been circulated. However, you know, and I think that when you look at the source of where this disinformation is coming from, you know, there is a campaign out there to
somebody else is looking for a little bit of fame, perhaps.
I accept it's a target, but the film still maintains its integrity.
There have been lots of nonsense talked about the film, mostly by people who haven't seen it. The UFO community is rife with rumours, downright lies, speculation, and all kinds of nonsense. And some of the people making these claims really ought to know better.
What degree or what field of expertise do these people have dealing with anemones of alien beings? I assure you none. We were learning. That was day one of school when they first cut into the first specimen.
I would hope that that somebody somewhere, when this film is shown around the world, will either say, yes, the film is genuine, or no, it's a hoax, or something in between. Be it somebody else who was there at the time, maybe the original cameraman will come forward and go on the record. That's something we hope will happen.
I believe that the reason that the photographer who took the Centilli films was able to keep the film footage was because he was already in the loop. He already knew what was going on. There was special requirements that needed to be taken on some of the film footage that he had taken. He had the expertise on how to do this. So what happened was that, okay, you go ahead, you take care of this, and as you finish it up in, say, blocks of 10, you call this number. We will dispatch a special courier to pick up the film and carry it back to where it's supposed to go. That happened. He got down to where he had, I believe, between 22 to 25 reels of film. He made the call. Well, by this time, that office had moved.
And I want to explain that little point because in September, I believe it was, our government formally organized the United States Air Force. Thus the name changed to Roswell Air Force Base. See? But at the time we were RAAF, Army Airfield.
When he eventually processed the remaining canisters, he tried and went to great lengths to try and get Washington to come and pick the reels of film up, but they didn't.
Knowing that the films were highly classified, probably at a top secret level, who are you going to turn to? No one that he knew was around him, so he couldn't talk because he was told not to mention it to anyone unless he was asked. This would be indicative of a SCI program. He'd be breaching security. Rightly or wrongly, he could still be brought up on charges. Well, after several years, no one asked for him. And I think he actually forgot about him. And I think time went on. Then he had a special event because he had a special person in his life. He wanted to do something for this special person. He didn't have the money to do it. But then he remembered the films. And if he could get the money to do something for this special person, then he could die a happy man. And he's up in years.
Had I not been involved in a company that had commercial interests, I would not have found the film. I found the film purely by accident. And I'm sure, as I've mentioned earlier, if this was part of a research into the subject, I probably would never have found the film.
I say that the film is the evidence and that the cameraman has done his part. Let's leave the cameraman alone and leave him in peace. Let's take the evidence and let's analyze it. Let's put it under a very, very powerful magnifying glass. If it's bogus, the proof will be in the evidence. But if it's genuine, and I believe it is, it's going to have far-reaching ramifications, not for just the United States government, but for the world.
How would you answer a potential critic that said to you, this is your version of the Hitler diaries?
I would say that they are wrong. I have never stated that the film is the autopsy of an alien creature. I have, however, presented it for people to examine and given it in good faith to many broadcasters around the world because they have the financial muscle and the ability to investigate it. We're just presenting it to the world and we're saying to people, please look at this film, tell us what it is.
One time, there was a requirement for our OIC to go to Fort Belvoir, Virginia. So I went ahead and I was selected as the driver to take him to Fort Belvoir, Virginia. After we arrived there, he went to where the officers were meeting for a briefing. The drivers went to another location. There was myself and an airman first class, and we went inside to the balcony area, which had a plexiglass cover over where we could look down to where the officers were. When we looked down there, we found that they were watching films. We were watching thinking, well, it has to be some type of science fiction movies that they're watching, where they're splicing them together like trailers at an end of a movie. We couldn't figure out what type of movies they were. So while we were talking amongst ourselves, we looked around, we had two gentlemen come in and told us we were to follow them. The airman and myself thought we were in trouble because we'd seen all these officers being brought together with taxpayers' money, watching what we perceived to be little clips from science fiction movies. Because I honestly didn't think that we would ever be in a position where I could be so easily exposed to something like that. However, after 4 days and 5 nights of that, I went ahead and finally convinced them that I wouldn't be discussing this situation. The interesting thing I found out when I first saw the films of the dissection, the word that I used to describe what I saw was haunting, and it had a special significance to me because I was seeing images of what I saw in 1969. That brought back specific memories. What happened to me is what they call intensified debriefing. And I can tell you this much, in intensified debriefing, you'll go ahead and you'll take sleep over food. You'll get water, because see, it's important you have water, or you'll die. They'll provide you with food. But you slept in spurts. You'd go and lay your head down on the pillow. You'd go into what they call deep sleep. That's about 3 to 5 minutes, and you'd be woken up and you'd be taken back, put under the lamps again for more intensified debriefing. And what they'd do, they knew that you were wondering what was going to happen to you. So it had an effect on you. And that's about the gist of it. Forgive me.
We invite whoever has the answers to this mystery to come forward and break the silence of almost 50 years. We believe the world is ready for the truth, whatever that may be, and for whatever challenge the truth brings with it. I'm Saul Reichlin, Roswell. The investigation continues.
I don't think anyone can be certain that it's a special effect. I mean, it's how do I know what the inside of aliens looks like? No one knows.
I can understand that there's a possibility that it's true, that it was real, made at that time.
on the surface of it, in my own mind, it looks like it has a great deal of validity.
This was the first cover-up, and several of us recognized it as such, but never said a word, because that's the way we were trained. You don't talk about these things.
We have photographs, we have films, we have expert witnesses. What more do you want? We could prove that these objects exist. We're past the point of proving they exist. The question now is, why are they here, and what do they want?
It would be childish to think that we are the only ones.
The UFO community is rife with rumors, downright lies, speculation, and all kinds of nonsense. And some of the people making these claims really ought to know better.
If you came to me and said that you created this illusion, you'd be working here like that.
You cannot fake a motion picture that easily.
So we're really looking for some answers, and well, maybe someone will come out after this movie now and tell the world maybe what happened.
Why in the world someone would invest such an amount of money, of efforts, of mise-en-scène to put together a 23 minutes film of this kind? It defies reason. It doesn't make sense.
Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army. Army officers say the missile, found sometime last week, has been inspected at Roswell, New Mexico, and sent to Wright Field, Ohio, for further inspection.